Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is 6 o'clock here in the morning, Tuesday morning, August 16th. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. We're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. I'm just waking up, having a coffee here, and I'm glad to be able to do these shows. I appreciate everybody who's tuning in. This is really my healing journey, and hopefully the information is helping somebody else. Appreciate everybody who's taking the time to tune in to all my shows. And I'm not a counselor or therapist, and you have to listen to all of my shows at your own discretion. I'm talking about abuse, and it's a very sensitive subject, and a lot of people may, find the show topic or the information disturbing or upsetting. So you have to know what's good for you to listen to, right? And all of my shows are like that. So listen to any or all of my shows at your own discretion. And young people under the age of 18, I just ask that you have permission to listen to my show. You have an adult, somebody who's older, who can help you, by listening to the show with you, can help you make a decision whether it's okay for you to listen, age appropriately, right? It's definitely not for young children, right? So there's a lot of adult material and content on my shows, and I just believe protecting children at all times. So young people under the age of 18 have somebody who's older, have an adult listen to the show with you, and then they can help you make a decision, right? So thanks everybody for being here. We're looking at Robert Berney's web pages, and Robert Berney is he's a codependence counselor. He's a codependence therapist. He's a grief counselor, and he's also an author. He's written a book called Codependence: The Dance of Wounded Souls. And his website information is www.joy2meu. That's joy, J-O-Y, the number 2, meu.com. The letters MEU. That's Joy to Me and You. And he's got some great information there. If you go to his site index and click on the site index, you can see all the categories that he's got his work listed in. He's written just a whole lot of stuff. He's a prolific writer, and you can see we're just going to cover portions of it. I'm mainly interested in the inner child healing work right now, and that's why we're looking at this. We've been on this webpage and on these web pages for months, probably almost 3 months now, at least 2.5 for sure. So, but I'm really getting a lot out of it, and I find it very helpful for me to sort of put in place, the work that I'm doing and the work that I need to do for my inner child healing work. And so, it's good stuff, and hopefully everybody's getting something out of it. So that's what we're looking at. And Robert Berney is also a spiritual teacher, so everything he's talking about is very spiritual, and some of it makes sense to me, and some of it's a little bit over my head. But for the most part, what he's talking about is the codependence, boundaries, codependence work, also inner child healing, the grief process, different things like that. So those all make sense to me, and I agree with most of what he's saying. Some of it I don't get, and some of it I'm still working on. But we're looking at the third page in the inner child healing work that he's written, and it's called Emotional Balance Through the Fear. What he's called it, the third page, is the recovery process for inner child healing through the fear. And so we're about halfway through the page here, and down, at least halfway through the page, called Taking Power Away from the Fear. That's where we left off yesterday. So I just want to pick back up right there. So that's where I'm going to start. And he says, in order to start finding some balance in recovery, it is important to learn how to take power away from the fear. In order to do that, it is very important to look at all the different levels involved in our reaction so that we can start to clear up our relationship with our own fear. So he's taking the power away from the fear. He said what we were looking at yesterday was that he said we need to take the shame and judgment out of our internal process. So that is why a spiritual belief system is important, he says, so that we can start seeing ourselves more clearly, start seeing realistically instead of through the shame filter of the disease, which he's talking about codependency, codependent behaviors and counter-dependent behaviors as the disease, right? So he says once we have started integrating a spiritual belief into our process or a spiritual philosophy that allows us to start looking clearly at cause and effect, then we can start to detach enough from our own process to see it more clearly. And I guess really what we were looking at yesterday was the whole idea of this internal, tapes that play in many survivors, of abuse. Many survivors of child abuse will have these internal belief systems that, I'm a bad child, or I must have been a bad kid. That's why my parents abused me, or if it wasn't the parents, that I was a bad kid and that's why this happened to me. Whoever was the main abuser. Many times we have these internal images of ourselves, really, that was given to us by somebody else, and whether it was a teacher, a coach, a mentor, or your parents. In my case, it was my parents and most of my siblings. Just because my siblings were being abused as well. It wasn't just me, you know what I mean? I was the last of 7, and I kind of caught a large portion of it because I grew up in it, 0 to, through the whole thing. But some of my siblings, there were a few of them that were actually not targeted by my parents. One of them was my sister, who was 5 years older than me. They were not. She was hiding all the time. Like, she was just not there. She was just staying quiet as a mouse and always in the background and never actually. She didn't really live in that house. Like, she just withdrew from. She just withdrew into herself. She's actually dissociative, and she's got a whole lot of problems. But my parents didn't target her, for the main part of the abuse. And but my oldest siblings, the ones who were quite a bit older than me, one of my sisters was 18 years older than me, actually. But my mother was pregnant at the same time she was. When my sister was pregnant with her first child, my mom was having me. That's this age spread between us. But there would have been more than 7 kids. I'm the last of 7 born, but there would have been about at least 10 that we know of, 10 or 11, because there was a bunch of stillborn babies in there. And then there was miscarriages. So, my mother would have had, who knows how many children, could be 15, 16 children. But I'm the last of 7 that actually made it. And, there was a huge spread in between us, 18 years. So, all of my siblings were living in the same home I was and growing up into the same conditions and the same environment, really. But my parents did sort of tend to target a few of us really for their rage, and that was my brother Rob, and myself, which is kind of bizarre because then my brother Rob turned around and sexually abused me at the age of 8 years old when he was 21. And so it's kind of sad and twisted because, I really cared about my brother, and I felt bad because my dad was always abusing him, horrifically. That's why the social workers got involved, because my dad was mainly abusing my brother Rob, and he actually, that's why the charges were brought against my parents, right? And so, I always felt bad for my brother, but he was so psychologically screwed in the head from the abuse that my dad had been putting on him, and also from my mom, just this abusive environment. So, this is the thing. Like, we had these majorly messed up belief systems, and so many people who have been abused will have, these belief systems that they're not worth anything, that they're just useless, or that they're bad, or whatever, because we've been told this as a child. So whoever told you that was incredibly wrong. Never should have done that, but this happens even in society. People saying, "Oh, you're not good enough because you don't own a $5 million home. You're not good enough because you don't have an executive job. You're not good enough because you don't drive a Beamer, or because you don't have some property in Lake Tahoe." Who cares? I really don't. But see, I'm glad that I don't have those problems, right? Because those issues, societal issues, I don't have any problems with that because I don't judge myself based on other people, right? I just refuse to do it. I've actually been very good in my lifetime to not do that. Probably because I grew up poor and really right under the poverty line. And we had food. We had enough to eat, and we were not withheld food. That's one thing that my parents did not do. They didn't starve us out, They didn't lock us down in the bedroom and starve us out. But, they fed us and everything. So we had plenty to eat, we weren't starved or anything like that, but we didn't have anything, you know what I mean? Like, we didn't have much. Didn't have any clothes, we didn't have any spare stuff, So as a girl growing up, I didn't have any fancy things like fancy clothes or anything like my school pictures that I do post up around for everybody to see. I do that on purpose because I want people to see what happens to children who are abused. All those school clothes that I have, a couple of the dresses were actually borrowed from neighbors. They weren't even mine, and my mom had to give them back. There was a couple of the school pictures I took where I was wearing my sister's clothes because I didn't have any clothes that were decent enough for a school photo. And so my mother, and it's not even that she didn't have the money, because my mother would buy and smoke 2 cartons of cigarettes a week. She just didn't want to go out to the store to shop for me, you know what I mean? And she wouldn't, and I was just a little kid, so I had to wear whatever I had, and so it was not we weren't, we weren't destitute. We had food, we had shelter, we had a whole lot of abuse and dysfunction and horrific stuff, you know what I mean? So I never did judge myself so much about what society thinks is a person has to have. So I don't carry around those tapes saying, "Oh, I'm not worth it because I don't have a three-bedroom house," or, I must just be unworthy because I don't have a huge family and children and all this stuff. I don't judge myself by other people's standards, But what I do have is tapes running around in my head from what my parents did to me, mainly from what my mother said to me, you know what I mean, which was over the years just a steady barrage of verbal assaults and also psychological damage, and my dad too. And then, the stuff from my brother is mainly just visual flashbacks of the sexual abuse that I suffered with him. He never really called me any names, you know what I mean? It's the stuff that was a different kind of hurt, But the tapes that my mother, her voice would just play around in my head for years and years, after, even after she's dead. My mother's passed away like many years ago now, like, 15, 16 years ago. And she's gone, and yet those tapes still play around in our heads. So I think that's what he's talking about. These belief systems, these tapes, these internal roles that we will play and continue to play until we change them. And that's changing that whole belief system. That's what I'm working on right now. And that's what I've been actually working on for 4.5 years, is changing the way I feel about myself, changing the way I feel about life, changing the way I feel about things, because I can't change the past. I mean, I can't go back and change that. That's done, There's no way to change that. And I can't even fake myself out and pretend, that it didn't happen. It happened, and that's reality, and that's all there is to it. But now I just need to learn how to change the way I feel. So that's what I'm doing, and I'm making some huge progress. It's taking me time, that's for sure. This kind of stuff does not happen overnight, Like for me, it didn't. Maybe it does for somebody else. I really was hoping that it would. But, 2 years on the air here, I've been talking and talking and talking. And, I mean, I still have things I'm working through. But I'm in so much of a better place just because I'm allowing myself to love myself. I mean, that's exactly what it is. I'm just allowing myself to be good to myself. I'm allowing myself to treat myself right. I don't hurt other people. I really try hard not to hurt other people. And I definitely have come 100% on, being good and kind to myself instead of beating myself up all the time because, I'm such a loser. I'm a bad person. I must be. My parents hated me. Did I deserve to be here? I even I was trying to kill myself up until like 4.5 years ago. Or was contemplating killing myself. And even moving to Canada was a suicide attempt. It was a suicide plan. I actually planned to move up here, and I won't tell anybody how I'm going to do it. But the thing is, the reason I moved to Canada was to get away from my abuser family. First of all, at the age of 30, I ran away at the age of 30 finally, and all my troubles just followed me. You know what I mean? And I was still in such misery, until the age of 41. So 11 years later, I finally decided, I said, man, how long do I have to live like this? Am I going to have to live like this for the rest of my life? Oh, my God, this is a life sentence, man. And I wanted out. And I wanted out when I was 10 years old. So that just tells you, I had been wanting out for like 31 years. And my brother committed suicide. My family's all suicidal. And it just seemed like the route to go, And 4.5 years ago, actually it was April 2007, I decided never again. I made a serious commitment to myself, and I said, that is the last time. That is the last time. I'm winning this fight. My parents are not going to win this fight. My parents won the fight for two of my brothers killed themselves, and I thought, man, my parents won that fight for them. My parents destroyed them literally, and that's what they were trying to do to all of us. And had I taken my life or self-injured or anything like that, and continued on this road to to hell, really in hell, I thought, I'm just letting my parents win this fight. That's what I'm doing. And they started it, and they want to finish it. They both are evil people, evil, twisted, rotten people. And how can you do that to your children and be able to sleep at night? I don't know. I know that my dad sleeps perfectly well. I think he does. My mother, she did not ever care what she did to us. She would spill my blood and just be able to laugh. She would laugh at me. She would laugh as she was hurting me. Like, my mother was sadistic, right? Very evil and sadistic. And she was sick, right, mentally ill. Right, both my parents were mentally ill. And so, it's like, how could you do that to a child? And my mother was abused, horrifically. And her mother, my grandmother, which I absolutely, loathe, killed one of her sons and got away with it. Well, sure, that was back in like the 1930s, right? No problem. Kill your kids, bury them out in the backyard, no problem. This is the sort of thing that went on, especially back in the farming communities back in Nova Scotia. You bet. You could just kill your kids and bury them. Nobody's going to say anything. And the courts knew, the law knew, they didn't do anything to her. My grandmother was also responsible for abusing a whole bunch of orphans that she took in the 1930s because there was no room at the orphanage. And the orphans all ran away. My mother said, she saw the orphans all running away down the street, down the road, actually, country road, right? And she said, "Where are you guys going?" And they were like, "We're taking our chances on the road, man, because this woman is beating us like dogs, and we are not staying, and we'll have better chance on the road." So these orphans took off. My grandmother was a horrible, horrible woman, and that's who my mother's mother was, right? So then my mother didn't. She used to be like, "Well, I'm not like my mother." She thought she was treating us decently, even though she was punching me in the face and giving me a bloody nose, beating on me with a belt. I'm sorry, I'm talking serious beatings. I'm not talking a little spanking. I got spankings too, right? I know the difference, right? My mother was spilling my blood, right? Bashing my head into things, heavy duty beatings, right? And clobber, and just, kick me around and just use me for a punching bag, right? And literally, and then she thought she was a great mother, right? Because compared to her mother, I guess she might have been. But the thing is she would be like, "Well, I didn't like to be abused. My mother treated me horribly and beat on me, and I took all the beatings for my younger siblings," she would say, trying to look like the one that everybody should be feeling sorry for. And I was like, "Well, then you know what it's like to be abused. You know what it's like to be hurt as a child, and look what you've done to us." And of course, I would land me a beating because I didn't care. I would tell my parents like it was. I wasn't going to put up with their garbage, and I had to, deal with them like my whole life, obviously. But the thing is I was like, you people, that's ridiculous. My God, it was, this is what people will do. So anyway, these internal tapes, play around and around and around. And I thought, I'm not gonna let my parents win this fight. No way. So I just realized that I needed to do this work. I was like, nobody else is going to do this for me, right? Nobody else is going to be able to change these belief systems for me. I'm going to have to do it myself, And it isn't going to come from somebody else. I've had nice people in my life tell me nice things, you know what I mean? It's been great. I've had some great support from friends and outside sources, right? Not my family members, which is par for the course. I couldn't really expect it anyway, and I don't, right? My siblings are just as screwed up as my parents were, And so what are you going to expect for that? Even some of my their children are screwed up, right? So what are you going to do? Right? The whole family is screwed right up, right? And so, and that's just my dad's offspring. My dad came up from a family of 10 kids, and all of my relatives all did so much better. I don't think they might have abused their children. I don't know. They all grew up, these siblings all grew up in the same home, dysfunctional and abusive, and they all have mental problems. But the thing is they all seem to fare so much better, and their kids seem to be treated so much better. I don't know. I think there was probably some abuse on their side, on my aunts and uncles' side too. And my mom's side, she came from, I think she was born into 7 kids, I believe. There was 7 kids, or maybe somewhere around there. And so they both came from big families, and those people, they abused their kids and allowed their kids to be abused, right? So, but my dad's and my mom split and moved down to the States, right? Because they wanted to, I guess, quote unquote, start a new life and get, have a chance to start again. And their marriage was in such shambles already, so they just couldn't cope, and so they couldn't pull it together, and they were mentally ill. So our family just spiraled downward. But the whole offspring, the whole offspring from these two different families in Nova Scotia produced a lot of miserable people. You know what I mean? And it's a real shame. It really is, because it's all based on dysfunction and abuse and garbage. And that's why, it's this, a lot of this stuff was put on me. I started out a normal, healthy child, but I was twisted and made diseased and twisted, my mind, my body, by these people who would do this stuff to me. And that's why I'm saying, I don't know how people can sleep. I really don't. I don't know how you could treat a child like that and think that it's okay. But they did. They thought it was fine. And even when the courts came down on them, and they had to go to court, and they were brought up or busted on child abuse charges, my parents were just like, "We love our." My dad was like, "Well, it's all their mother. It's all the mother." And then my mom was like, "Oh, it's all their father. He's the one abusing all the kids, right?" And the kids, all my older siblings, went to court, and they were like, "No, it's both. Both of them are abusing us." So my parents were both brought up on charges, which was really funny because my mom was trying to get out of it, and she couldn't get out of it because they actually hauled her into court too, which was great. And so, they said, "Look, you people, you need to straighten up. You need to stop abusing your children. You need to get marital counseling. Your kids need counseling. They all need separate counseling. You need family counseling, but all of you need separate counseling. You're all messed up, and you you've created this mess for your children, and they need help, right? And so you need to, if they're going to stay in the home, you got to have social workers coming in, and you're going to have, it's all going to be monitored, right? So the social workers were around for a while, right? And while they were there, things had to calm down because my parents couldn't continue on their BS while the social workers were around. As soon as the social workers were out of the picture, it all started again. And I'm talking with a fury, you know? It was like my parents couldn't wait to get at each other's throats, and they couldn't wait to get at us. You know what I mean? So as soon as the social workers were out of the picture, it all got extremely abusive, and my parents were so in their element. They were so back into what they wanted, which was to destroy each other, to destroy themselves, and to destroy their children. Right? Now this just makes me so sick to my stomach, and the thing that pisses me off is that people knew about it. There were neighbors, the people that could have stepped in. Did they step in? I don't know how those neighbors could even sleep at night knowing that my mother was beating the shit out of me. My mom would do this out in the front yard. Like, she didn't mind. She would slap me down, kick me around in front of people. And people would just sit there and say, yeah, she's a rotten kid. She just deserves an ass kicking anyway. This is how this is back in the 1960s and 70s, right? So there was a whole different take on things back then. Even though people knew it was wrong. It was a family problem, right? And so I grew up listening to people telling me that I was just a spoiled brat and I needed to have my ass kicked, as I'm having my head bashed in and having my nose nearly broken and my body just totally used as a punching bag. I was like, how dare you people? You know what I mean? And so I developed a hatred, a real hatred for life, for my parents, for these people out here in the world. I really developed a hatred for people, period, and I developed a self-hatred, right? And so that's been hard to shake, as you can tell by, I didn't start out as a little child with this voice, right? I started out with a little innocent child's voice, and this is the result. My voice today is the result of being hammered and hammered and hammered, hammered emotionally, hammered physically, hammered sexually, just hammered, And so I am a little cynical. I am a little bit, what are you supposed to do, right? A lot of this stuff will have to, I don't know if it will ever really be able to completely change, you know what I mean? Because this was so ingrained. I'm now 46 years old, you know what I mean? So I can't, this voice will probably be with me forever, right? But the thing is my inner child voices, that I still have, I'm working to help them out, you know what I mean? So I'm going back, and that's why I'm doing all this inner child work, is to change these belief systems, and learn how to love myself and learn how to love other people and learn how to enjoy this life, And so this is where I've been for the last 4.5 years. Instead of killing myself, I decided to live, right? And I thought, I can't keep living the way I have been. I can't keep doing that. I can't keep living in that hatred and that rage and that evil, twisted, place that my parents provided for me to live inside this shell of a body, right? I thought, man, I have to change this, or I'm going to die. I'll either die, just die from some sort of disease that's going to come on my body because of this, or I'll just end up taking my own life. You know what I mean? Or I'm just going to die some miserable old person. I said, man, I've got to change this. So literally, it is really up to us. We can't expect somebody else to do this for us. Most people didn't even realize I was having these problems because, like I said, I'm pretty high functioning. I can go to work. I can laugh with the best of them. I actually enjoy laughing and having fun with people. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, I'm still who I am, right? And I recognize that because I am high functioning. I can hold down jobs and everything else and go have fun socially, no problem, right? But the thing is, at the end of the day, when I come home, I'm stuck with me. So that's when I'm sitting on the couch, 4.5 years ago, wanting to self-injure. I mean, life wasn't all that bad. You know what I mean? Like, it's just the fact that I had all of this internal stuff that was just haunting me, and I was just like, how long do I have to suffer this? I go to work. I go to work all day. Nobody has a clue what's going on inside my mind, and they certainly have no clue that I'm coming home thinking about self-injuring or killing myself, right? And I thought, that's how much pain I'm in. This is crazy. Like, the world needs to see my pain. And so what I did is I said, that was my cry for help, right? And so what I did is, instead of hurting myself, I got busy and started talking and started writing and started reaching out, right? And so that's the thing. I mean, it's like, instead of, I just decided, okay, it's worth it to me. It's so much more worth it to tell my story of anguish than it is to keep it in and die from it. And so I just started reaching out to other survivors and writing a blog that was public facing, and really started to deal with some of this stuff, and it has taken me 4.5 years, and that's a long time, or a little bit over 4 years, and it doesn't happen overnight for sure. But so you say, it's in order to start finding some balance in recovery, it's important to take the power away from the fear of doing recovery, the fear of allowing ourselves to feel different. This is really what he's talking about. He says anytime we have a strong reaction to someone or something, it means there is old stuff involved, old wounds, unresolved grief. And one of the first steps to taking the power away from the fear is to detach from the feeling a little and take an honest look at reality. He says it may feel terrifying, may feel life-threatening, but is that truth, he says. And so you just read down a little bit further, and he says there is a tool that comes out of transactional analysis that can be very helpful in taking some power away from fear. He says it's called a fear slide, and the way it works is that you write down what your fear is, and then you say, I am afraid I will be alone on Valentine's Day, or I am afraid he won't be my friend anymore, or I am afraid I won't get the job, etc. Then on the next line, you write the answer to the question. If that happens, then what? If that happens, then what? And then you write what you feel like. Then I will feel hurt or whatever. On the next line, you write the answers to that same question. Then what? And you keep doing this down the page. Eventually, you will come to I will die or I will cease to exist, right? And so he says, I'm afraid it happens. Then what? So then you go back to the original fear, and you ask yourself, will I die if I'm alone on Valentine's Day? The answer is, of course, no, you won't die. As mentioned, the ego is focused on survival, so that translates into avoidance of pain. And in order to help us avoid what it perceives as survival-threatening pain, the ego generates fear and then magnifies it, turning it into a huge monster. And it's very helpful to force ourselves to take a realistic look at the monster in order to stop giving our emotional reactions all the power. Right? So he says in our disease, the fear of being alone on Valentine's Day feels life-threatening. It feels like a big monster. If we give power to that fear, what happens is we get so uncomfortable living with the fear that we try to find some way to repress it. The ways we find are usually self-destructive: alcohol, drugs, food, whatever. So he says if we can't take a realistic and honest look at the monster and say to ourselves, no, I won't die if I'm alone on Valentine's, but I will be sad. Bingo. He says the reason we are afraid is because we have a lot of unresolved grief over lonely holidays, pain over failed relationships, etc., all going back to the core wound of the little child who felt alone and unloved or unlovable. So he says if we can start to be emotionally honest with ourselves by owning our grief, it will help us to take power away from the fear. So he says learning to be emotionally honest with ourselves is a whole other aspect of the process dynamic. He says that I'm not going to talk about it in this article, but he actually has a whole other series of articles on that. He says, I will get into that in another article in the series. There are other articles on my website about that. He says, what I will say about it is that it is very important to do some of our processing verbally or through writing. So he says, we do not get in touch with our feelings through thinking. See, and that's the issue. I decided I just wanted to reach out, and I thought, I'm going to start talking to people. I'm going to reach out and just talk to some survivors. So that's what I did. I started reaching out to survivors, and I also got involved in an online group support, which was anonymous, except for I wasn't anonymous on there, but you could be. So I got involved in a child abuse survivors group online anonymously. It was an anonymous group, but I went on with my name. And also I started writing a blog, which was Not So Fond Memories Growing Up in an Abusive Home, and I started writing these entries every night. So it's very helpful because I started talking and I started writing and I started letting some of this stuff come out that needed to come out because I had been thinking about it my whole life. Thinking wasn't getting me anywhere. It was just killing me. So, it really helped me to talk, and that's why, I decided to do this show and just talk, because I want to encourage other people, because this is really the main reason why I've been able to make this kind of progress, is because I'm allowing myself to go through this stuff in these little segments during the day instead of all day. Thinking about it or being depressed or whatever. I just allow myself to work through my process for about an hour a day, right? And that's good, because before it was eating my life up. It was taking my life away, really. And so, now, this is, I don't know, it worked for me. I don't know, everybody's different and everybody has to do things, everybody has to do their own thing, right? Whatever works for you. But I would say whatever it is, make sure you do it. We have about a minute left. So thanks, everybody, for being here. I appreciate it very much. And, if you're a survivor and you're just thinking, I don't know how I'm going to cope, you you do the right thing. you do the right thing for yourself, and that is to learn to love yourself and make a phone call to the crisis line, call somebody, get some help, or either that, do some self-help like I'm doing. But whatever you do, you make sure, that you stick around and you do not ever give up. Like, we certainly deserved so much better. My God, we did. And I don't mind saying that, and I'll say it every day of my life, because I know that none of us deserve to be treated like that. And I know that I didn't, so I know you didn't. We have to learn to love ourselves, take good care of ourselves. We were not taken care of as children, so we have to do that ourselves. There won't be anybody who can do that for us. We have to do it. So I say stick around, fight the good fight. Don't ever, ever give up, right? Do whatever you have to do to make sure that you win this fight, right? Have a great day, everybody, and I'll be back on tomorrow morning, same time, same place. One child to be survivor to another, and then tomorrow night. So take good care of yourself. Have a really good day. If you need anything, just leave me a message here on Blog Talk Radio, or you can contact me on Facebook. I'm like all over the place. So if you need anything, get a hold of me. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.